Welcome to the captivating world of Dune. As we progress through the novel, we uncover the intriguing Fremen culture, which challenges and expands the Bene Gesserit's definition of humanity established in the opening pages of the novel, which we covered in a previous video. The Fremen, a central society in Dune, may seem simple to Paul and Jessica at first, but they soon discover the hidden complexity of this highly disciplined culture forged by surviving in a harsh environment. We will discuss Paul's encounter with the Amtal rule, which cements his place among the Fremen and offers an alternative perspective on defining humanity. Don't forget to subscribe if you like this type of content, and let's get started. It is difficult to understand the Fremen without first understanding their relationship with their planet, Arrakis. In spite of its dangerous desert environment, Arrakis is regarded as the most valuable planet in the universe because it is the only place where the spice is made and mined. Because spice is necessary for the Bene Gesserit and the Spacing Guild to function, and because addiction amongst the wealthy is prevalent, the spice trade is a highly prized commodity, and the house in control of it is both immensely powerful and vulnerable. House Harkonnen, who have been stewards of Arrakis for centuries and in charge of the spice mining operations at the beginning of the novel, often referred to the native Fremen as scum, the same term which they also use towards their slave population. Though Arrakis is necessary for society in Dune to function, there appears to be little interest in the planet aside from spice. The Fremen have a reputation as fierce fighters. Any attempt to capture them for questioning or labor has failed, and whenever a battle has occurred, the Fremen have decimated both Harkonnen soldiers and the greatly feared Imperial Sardaukar army. Likely because of this fear of the Fremen, almost nothing is known about why spice exists or how it is made. The Fremen bribed the Spacing Guild with spice to keep the skies of Arrakis clear of satellites to ensure their movements and activities cannot be tracked. The spice, the most valuable substance in the universe, is everywhere on Arrakis, and so the Fremen are extremely rich in interplanetary terms, even if that wealth is not made manifest in their daily life. One gets the sense that the spice mining operations happen because the Fremen let them happen, rather than them being a colonized population subject to the will of others. In an early alternate Dune outline by Frank Herbert called Spice Planet, the Fremen are called the Free Men, but this is not to say that the Fremen work in harmony with their planet's colonizers. They despise the Harkonnens and even mistrust the Atreides family when they begin their stewardship of the planet at the beginning of the novel. But careful, deliberate, and honest diplomacy by Duke Leto and his soldiers builds their trust and respect, and the Fremen gradually become something close to allies, though they maintain their fiercely independent ways and keep their secrets. There's also another reason why the Fremen are much more interested in forming an alliance with the Atreides family. They have a legend, implanted by the Bene Gesserit centuries before, that an off-world figure known as the Lisan al-Gaib, also known as the voice from the outer world and the one who will lead us to paradise, will come to their planet and free them from colonial oppression. This Messiah will be the son of a Bene Gesserit and possesses deep wisdom and power. He will also be able to become a fully integrated member of Fremen society. Naturally, Paul and Jessica intrigue them. Jessica, using her Bene Gesserit training, passes an important test from Mapes, their Fremen housekeeper, and Paul saves Mapes' life when she becomes an innocent bystander during an assassination attempt on him. These incidents, along with various others, fuel rumors that Paul is their long-awaited Messiah. After House Atreides is betrayed by House Harkonnen and Duke Leto is killed, Jessica and Paul are able to escape into the desert, but are quickly discovered by a tribe of Fremen. The Fremen normally kill off-worlders on sight because they jeopardize safety and security, but both Jessica and Paul prove themselves by using Bene Gesserit fighting abilities called the Weirding Way, where a user can move so quickly as to appear in two places almost simultaneously. The Fremen are already some of the most fierce and skilled warriors in the universe, hardened by the difficulty of life on a desert planet, but Jessica, who appears to be a weak off-worlder, has fighting skills more powerful than theirs. Jessica's defeat of Stilgar, the tribe's leader, is significant because the Fremen recognize leadership mainly through fighting ability. Paul, however, is confronted with a different choice than his mother. The Fremen who attacked Paul, Yamis, is stubborn, proud, and hot-headed, and his humiliation at the hands of Jessica and especially of Paul, who's only 15 years old, angers him. Yamis invokes the Amtal rule and issues the Dahadi challenge to Paul, where he will confront Paul in single combat to prove that his defeat at Paul's hands was a mere aberration. Both Jessica and Stilgar attempt to stop the fight, Stilgar by attempting to deflect Yamis's anger away from Paul and toward himself, and Jessica through her Bene Gesserit abilities, but Yamis refuses to back down. Since Paul and Jessica have accepted the tribe's protection, they must also submit to its ways. Yamis has the right to call Paul out for combat, and so Paul must fight. The challenge cannot be refused if Paul and Jessica wish to remain members of the tribe. Like many elements of society in Dune, such as the caste system and the hereditary nobility, trial by combat has a connection to medieval Europe as a means for people to quickly solve disputes without a localized court system. It makes sense that the Fremen, who have no centralized government, would use it. But unlike the medieval versions, which blamed or praised divine providence for the outcome of the fight, the Fremen view trial by combat mostly as an exercise of skill. The winner of the fight wins not just because it is God's will, but because he or she is a better fighter, and status within the tribe is earned based on the outcome of these types of fights. In order to ensure fairness, each fighter fights armed only with a Christ knife, the sacred weapon of the Fremen. No shield or armor is used either. Like the nobility of old, Paul has been trained for combat since childhood both by his mother and his father's weapons masters. Jessica knows that her son is a fighting machine. Jessica's use of machine here suggests that Paul's abilities are detached from his emotions. But Paul is trained to fight as the nobles do, with body shields. He is aware that this technique places him at a disadvantage to Yamis, who has been taught no such thing. Yamis is a skilled fighter, as all Fremen are, but anger causes him to be sloppy. Paul can easily deflect his attack, but is too slow on the offensive to land a fatal blow. Stilgar, misreading this slowness as an insult to Yamis rather than a result of Paul's training, begins to grow angry. Stilgar can see that Paul has the skill to win the battle handily, but is confused at what appears to be hesitancy on Paul's part. Stilgar cannot understand why Paul would play with his opponent, as it is not a practice amongst the Fremen to humiliate their opponents in a Tahadi challenge. This confusion highlights the differences between Paul and Yamis. Both are skilled fighters in each of their cultures, but trained in entirely different ways. Since the Fremen play by different rules, Paul must adjust to them or die. Another way in which this difference is highlighted is when Paul finally inflicts a minor injury to Yamis's hand and asks him if he yields. Another thing he has been trained to do since the nobility usually end a fight after first blood. Stilgar then tells Paul, death is the test of it. Paul realizes then that he's up against a different set of rules than those he has ever encountered. The only way to end this dispute is by killing his opponent. As he hears Stilgar's word, he realizes that the real test of the Tahadi challenge is not just to prove fighting prowess, but to show that one is able and willing to kill another, even a friend, if the circumstances call for it. The test of destruction of the Amtal rule here is the literal destruction of another human being. This murder, Paul's first, must be carried out personally rather than relying on conventional methods or the secretive tactics of the noble families. Paul learns an important lesson about Fremen honor. They kill swiftly and equate that swiftness with mercy. Though they are tough and fearsome, they are not cruel. In fact, they find cruelty offensive. They believe that killing someone quickly in the Tahadi challenge shows respect, and they are not fond of torturing their enemies. The longer the fight lasts, the more incensed the tribe becomes. They can see too that Paul will be the clear winner and cannot understand why he is hesitant to kill. Here, Paul is still struggling between what is familiar to him about fighting and what is new. He must learn that for the Fremen, a swift death is a merciful one. The definition of the Amtal rule is that it defines limits. The limit here is the difference between mercy and cruelty. Paul kills Yamis, and within moments, the body is removed. The Fremen will take it to a death still, a machine that will compress it until only water is left. Both Jessica and Stilgar reprimand Paul after the fight ends, Jessica because she does not want her son to revel in his ability to murder, and Stilgar because he still believes Paul dragged out the fight. Both of them, either consciously or unconsciously, perceive that Paul's victory is not just indicative of his fighting prowess, but that it's a step towards a pivotal leadership role. Stilgar makes his suspicion of Paul's future prominent. Stilgar is still misinterpreting Paul's actions as cruelty, which is offensive to him. Jessica then informs him that Paul has never killed a man, and this surprises Stilgar. Again, this is an example of cultural misunderstanding. Fremen learn how to fight as children and become warriors in the tribe as young teens. Stilgar has assumed that Paul has become so skilled a fighter not through training, but use and application of his skills through many acts of murder. Now Stilgar no longer sees Paul as a 15-year-old boy in need of protection, but as a skilled warrior that will have the ability to defeat him soon if he cannot already. This ritual has also cemented Paul's place as a member of Stilgar's tribe. He will take the place of Yamis, who he has defeated. Paul earns his name, as a Fremen must earn everything to which he or she is entitled. Stilgar names Paul Usul, comparing it to the support provided by the base of a pillar. This name can only be used by members of Siege Top and is not allowed for anyone else to use it. Unlike the Bene Gesserit, who demand simple obedience in all things, the Fremen earn obedience and loyalty through collectivism. When someone feels they are an integral member of that community, they are likely to consider the needs of the community first and unlikely to betray that community. But Usul is also suggestive of Paul's future leadership abilities. This name suggests that someday he will be the main support mechanism of this community. The theme of earning is at the center of Fremen philosophy and is essential to their definition of humanity. While there is no separation between who can be considered human and who is not, all Fremen are born human, there is a sense that a member of the community must earn their status and be able to pull their own weight. A common practice among the Fremen is to abandon those who are blind or otherwise severely disabled in the desert to die. On one hand, this practice does make some practical sense. The Fremen are an extremely disciplined people, and those who must be physically cared for are likely to be a liability if the tribe should have to move quickly or be attacked. But on the other, it is a disturbing practice that demonstrates judgment within the community on who is worthy and able to be a part of it. This definition excludes the disabled, the elderly, and the sick, though their sacrifice is seen as a spiritual practice, a gift to the sandworm god who the Fremen view as a steward and protector of their way of life. After Paul is awarded his secret siege name, he then chooses his Fremen name, which he will be called openly by members of other tribes. He remembers a small mouse he saw in the deep desert before he and his mother were discovered by the Fremen. Stilgar informs him the mouse is called muad'dib. It is indicative of Paul's modesty that he identifies with a mouse rather than a more fearsome creature. The sigil of House Atreides is a hawk which devours mice. The Fremen see the value of muad'dib's life. The mouse is not viewed as an annoying vermin, as humans often view mice, but as a creature with wisdom and lessons to teach for those who are willing to learn them. Paul also knows from his lessons that muad'dib is a constellation in the sky of Arrakis, a sparkling mouse whose tail points north, a guide point for those lost in the desert. This symbolic mouse transfers the lessons of muad'dib to the spiritual realm, reminding lost Fremen that even the lowliest of creatures has value. Like the name Usul, muad'dib is indicative of leadership, but a different sort of model of leadership than the Bene Gesserit propose. For the Fremen, a leader is more than just a skilled fighter. A leader protects and provides for his tribe, ensuring their survival. He is generous in time of need, but also understands the necessity of discipline and law. He also leads by example, teaching those after him how to survive as well as thrive. Paul, sensing the significance of his Fremen name, but not willing to entirely rescind his old one, elects to keep his given name and be known to the Fremen as Paul muad'dib, thereby merging his Atreides and Fremen identities. Paul is a human name rich in historical and religious significance. Saint Paul the Apostle carried the Christian religion to pagan Europe and Asia. Usul represents the functional and mechanical as well as the figurative, and muad'dib the animal and a symbolic guide. But unlike the elements of this triangle, which according to the Bene Gesserit exist in a kind of hierarchy in which human reigns supreme, all three exist within Paul no matter how much he may try to suppress them, and his attempts to keep them balanced is a consistent theme throughout the novel. The final part of the ritual emphasizes more important Fremen values. Water is scarce in the deep desert and is the Fremen's most valuable commodity. Nearly every ritual they hold involves water in some way. Paul is shocked to discover first that the water from Yamis's body belongs to him. The cannibalistic overtones of the ritual repulse him, just as he was repulsed by Mohaim's lessening of the human race to breeding stock. Jessica insists he takes the water to respect Fremen ways. Both of them are being integrated into the tribe, and both must observe their rituals. Then, Paul is uncomfortable when Yamas's belongings are either distributed to members of the tribe in need or taken by his friends. Paul struggles over his conflict to do what he feels is looting the dead. Born to privilege, he has never known material need and has never had any reason to covet or steal anything. He is still struggling with his impulse to maintain his individual identity and his belief that property belongs to the owner, not the tribe. But the Fremen take a different view. Either property is earned or it is given away, even after the owner has died, because all things fundamentally belong to the tribe. Fremen have been taught their entire lives to value moisture so much that they cannot even shed tears for the dead. In the novel, Paul shed tears for Yamas, the first man he has killed. Paul's tears not only serve the function of honoring Yamas's memory and expressing his remorse, but as an expression of loss for something in himself. Paul perceives that his self is diminished in some way. He experienced the profound loss of a parent, his friends, and much of his identity. Paul is no longer Paul. He's both something more, he is now Fremen, and something less, as he is now part of a tribe, and part of his autonomy is gone. As Paul takes Yamas's water, Chani, the Fremen girl Paul has dreamed of before he arrived on Arrakis, tells him in the words of the ritual, may he pass it on in his time for the good of the tribe. The double meaning here is important. Not only does the water Paul earns, either through combat, debt, or trade, ultimately belongs to the tribe, his own water now belongs to the tribe. Even his body is no longer his own. This sequence, Paul and Jessica's initiation into the community of Siege Tabr, is essential in understanding what the Fremen value as well as how they differ from the Bene Gesserit. When a Fremen dies, his water becomes part of the tribe's aquifer, symbolizing his permanent connection to the community even after his death. All things are for the good of the tribe. The Bene Gesserit do have elements of collectivism within their culture, but their culture is based fundamentally in their voluntary and elitist separation from nearly everything and everyone else. The Bene Gesserit believe in the humanity of only a very limited population of people. However, the Fremen have no such perception of difference. They view every Fremen with the same perception of human dignity. For the Fremen, one is born human, while the Bene Gesserit become human. There is still an exclusivity present in the Fremen's view of humanity, but it is an exclusivity born out of long secrecy and both the cultural and literal memory of past oppression. It is also a view that is not entirely opposed to outsiders, but one that also privileges Fremen ways above others. Once Jessica and Paul prove they value the same things as Fremen do, they are invited into the tribe as permanent members and even endowed with leadership roles. Fremen are an ancient people who sought out the difficulty and hostility of Arrakis purposefully after centuries of colonial oppression and enslavement at the hands of the nobility. Paul later observes that the Fremen were a people whose living consisted of killing an entire people who had lived with rage and grief all their days, never once considering what might take the place of either. The rage and grief which empowered the Fremen to free and separate themselves from other people also make them dangerous, because Paul knows that someday that rage and grief must be directed outward and the consequences of it will be devastating. Thank you for sticking with me until the very end. Your support means a lot, and I hope you enjoyed delving into the Fremen culture and different perspectives on humanity in Dune. If you have any thoughts or insights, please share them in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you, and I hope to see you in the next video. This was Heads and Tails. Till next time.